I went to bring my fiancée home from a party. Instead, I found her barely conscious in a bedroom and got sent a video of her making out with one guy on a table minutes earlier. When I asked the guy what happened after the video cut, I was supposed to be there for 10 minutes. That was the plan I told myself while driving across town, following the navigation to a house I had never been to before. Leora had texted earlier that the party ran late, that people kept arriving, that she would leave soon. Then the messages slowed. Then they stopped completely. I told myself it was loud music, low battery, nothing unusual. Still, something in my chest kept tightening the closer I got. The street was crowded in a way that already felt wrong. Cars parked half on sidewalks, half blocking driveways. A few people stood outside, smoking and laughing, but the laughter sounded forced, like it had already gone on too long. When I parked, one of them looked at my car, then looked away too quickly. That was the first moment I felt the night tilt. Inside, the house smelled of alcohol and something sharper, almost medicinal. The music was still playing, but lower than expected for a party that was supposedly peaking. People were scattered instead of packed together. Cups were everywhere, but most of them were abandoned, half full, melting ice dripping onto the floor. Conversation stopped when I walked past. Not abruptly, but enough that I noticed. I asked where Leora was. No one answered right away. A woman near the kitchen pointed upstairs without saying anything. Her hand shook while she did it. I climbed the steps 2 at a time, my heart beating fast enough to make my ears ring. Halfway up, I heard someone whisper my name, but when I turned, the hallway was empty. The bedroom door at the end of the hall was closed. I knocked once. No response. I pushed it open. Leora was on the bed, turned slightly on her side, her hair stuck to her face. Her eyes were open but unfocused, blinking too slowly, like she was trying to look through water. One of her shoes was missing. Her dress strap had slipped off her shoulder. She did not react when I said her name. She did not react when I touched her arm. Panic does strange things to time. Everything felt both immediate and distant, like I was watching myself move. I sat her up carefully, trying to keep her awake, asking questions she could not answer. Her head lolled forward. Her words came out slurred and disconnected, fragments that made no sense together. I reached for my phone to call an ambulance. That was when it vibrated. A message from an unknown number. No text, just a video. I did not want to watch it. I knew that instinctively, but my thumb pressed play anyway. The video was shot in the living room downstairs. The angle was high, someone standing on a chair or couch. Leora was in the center of the frame, on top of the coffee table. She was laughing, unsteady, her movements exaggerated and loose. A man stood between her knees, his hands on her waist. People around them cheered. Then he leaned in. They kissed. It was not a quick, accidental moment. It was slow, deliberate, encouraged. Someone whistled. Someone shouted something I could not hear clearly. The camera zoomed in, shaky with excitement. Leora's eyes were half closed, her head tilting back. The timestamp showed it had been recorded less than 20 minutes earlier. The video ended abruptly, cutting off mid-laughter. My stomach dropped so hard it felt physical, like I had missed a step on a staircase. I looked at Leora again. She was barely conscious, her head resting against my chest now, breathing shallow but steady. The woman in the video looked like her, sounded like her, but the person in my arms did not feel like someone capable of choosing anything. I carried her downstairs. The room went silent when people saw her like that. Someone muttered that she had just had too much to drink. Someone else said she needed water. No one met my eyes. I asked who the man in the video was. A few people glanced toward the back of the room. He was standing near the sliding door, scrolling on his phone like nothing had happened. Tall, dark hair, wearing a jacket like he was already prepared to leave. When I walked up to him, he looked up calmly, almost curious. I showed him the video without saying anything. He watched it, nodded once, then shrugged. I asked him what happened after the video cut. He told me Leora wanted to lie down. He said he helped her upstairs. He said she was fine when he left. He said it casually, like he was explaining a minor inconvenience, not the last moments anyone could verify. The way he spoke did not match the situation. There was no hesitation, no concern, no confusion. When I asked how long he stayed upstairs, his answer changed slightly. When I asked who else was there, he named someone who later said they never went upstairs at all. I told him I was taking her to the hospital. He said that was unnecessary. That was when I realized he was afraid of something specific, and it was not me. On the drive to the hospital, Leora drifted in and out, her fingers clutching my jacket like she was holding onto the last solid thing in reach. She whispered my name once, barely audible, then went quiet again. I replayed the video over and over in my head. Not the kiss itself, but the crowd around it, the way people watched like it was entertainment. At the emergency room, doctors took her back immediately. I sat alone in a plastic chair under harsh lights, my phone buzzing constantly now. Messages from people at the party. Apologies that sounded rehearsed. Explanations that contradicted each other. One message stood out. The same unknown number sent another text. There's more. No attachment this time. Just that. I looked back at the video again and noticed details I had missed before. The way Leora's balance was already off. The way her reactions lagged behind what was happening. The way the man's grip tightened when she wobbled, not protective, but controlling. I realized then that the video was not sent to confess. It was sent to distract. A nurse came out and asked me questions about what Leora had consumed, whether she had taken anything voluntarily. I answered honestly, which meant admitting how little I actually knew about the last few hours of her night. Blood tests were ordered. Toxicology screens. Standard procedure, they said. Nothing about this felt standard. While waiting, I stepped outside for air and called the party host, a man named Morel. He answered on the third ring, his voice tight. When I told him where I was, he went quiet. I asked him who had been filming all night. He said everyone. I asked who deleted videos. He did not answer. When I asked about the bedroom door, he said he did not know it had been locked, then corrected himself and said it might have been stuck. When I asked who had access to the upstairs rooms, he said people wandered everywhere. Every sentence sounded like it had been prepared in advance. Back inside, the doctor told me they suspected something more than alcohol. They said they would know more soon. They asked if Leora had any enemies, any reason someone might want to harm her. The question felt unreal, like it belonged to someone else's life. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. This time, it was a still image pulled from a longer video. It showed Leora being guided toward the staircase, her feet barely lifting. The man from the living room stood behind her, his hand firm on her arm. In the background, someone else watched, their face turned away from the camera. The timestamp was later than the first video. The message beneath it read, "This is when things changed." I realized then that the night was not over. It had just started unraveling. And whatever happened after that video cut was something people had worked very hard to hide. The waiting room clock moved too slowly, each minute stretching until it felt deliberate. I sat there replaying the image over and over, not the kiss on the table, but the moment captured later, the one nobody had wanted me to see. Leora being guided toward the stairs, her weight clearly not her own anymore. Someone had filmed that knowingly. Someone had decided it mattered. The doctor returned first, not with results, but with a change in tone. Leora was stable, but not simply intoxicated. They had found substances in her system that did not align with anything she normally consumed. The levels suggested timing that overlapped with the party, not earlier in the day. It was not enough for conclusions yet, but it was enough to change how the hospital documented everything that followed. That shift mattered more than anyone at the party understood. I stepped outside again and started calling people back, one by one, not to accuse them, but to let them talk. People fill silence with mistakes when they think they are helping themselves. One person said Leora had been fine until late. Another said she had seemed off almost immediately. Someone claimed she had gone upstairs alone. Someone else said she was carried. No two versions matched. When I asked specifically about Kellen, answers tightened. He had arrived with someone. He had left early. He had stayed late. He had been quiet. He had been loud. Every story bent around him like he was the axis everyone was trying not to name. I returned to the house before dawn. The place looked different in daylight. Messier, smaller, stripped of the party illusion. Empty cups still littered the floor. A table leg was cracked from where people had climbed onto it. I photographed everything, not because I knew what I was doing, but because instinct said the room would not look this way again for long. Morel was there, pacing, phone glued to his ear until he saw me. He tried to act relieved. He tried to act concerned. His body betrayed him. He stood too far away. His hands never stopped moving. I told him the hospital was documenting the case. I told him police would be involved. I told him devices would be examined. His face changed at that last part, a flash of something sharp and angry before it disappeared behind forced calm. He admitted then, not directly, but in fragments. He said people had filmed everything because it was normal now. He said videos got deleted all the time. He said nobody meant harm. He said Kellen had friends who were nervous about footage being misunderstood. Misunderstood was the word he kept using. I walked upstairs. The bedroom where I had found Leora was cleaner than it should have been. The sheets had been removed. The trash can was empty. Windows were open despite the cold. Someone had tried to erase a room that had already been witnessed. On the floor, near the baseboard, I found a broken acrylic nail. It was not Leora's. She never wore that shape or color. That detail anchored something in my mind. Someone else had been there, close enough for physical contact, close enough to leave a trace. Back at the hospital, a police officer met me quietly in the hallway. Not accusatory, not dramatic, just methodical. He asked about the video. I showed him everything I had received. His expression tightened when he saw the timestamps. He told me they had already spoken to Kellen. Kellen had changed his story. Now he claimed Leora had initiated contact earlier in the night. He claimed she had followed him upstairs. He claimed the door had never been locked. He claimed he left when she fell asleep. Each claim contradicted either video evidence or witness statements already collected. The officer asked if I knew how Kellen was connected to Leora. I said I did not. That was when the officer told me they had found messages on someone else's phone linking Kellen to a person Leora had known socially through work, someone who had been invited to the party specifically because Leora was attending. That detail reframed everything. The party was not random. Kellen was not a stranger. Leora had not simply crossed paths with someone new. Someone had created proximity deliberately, then watched what happened. I sat beside Leora later that day while she slept, monitors humming quietly around us. When she woke, her confusion cut deeper than any anger could have. She knew who I was. She knew where she was. She knew she felt wrong inside her own body. She did not remember the table. She did not remember the stairs. She did not remember the bedroom. She asked me why people were angry with her. I did not know how to answer without hurting her further. While she rested, my phone continued to fill. Screenshots circulated. The original video had spread beyond the party already. Someone had uploaded it anonymously. Comments appeared within minutes. Strangers dissecting a moment they did not understand, assigning blame with confidence born from distance. The longer version of the video surfaced that evening. It arrived through a different contact, someone who said they were scared but tired of lying. The clip began earlier, showing Leora already unsteady, her drink being refilled repeatedly by different hands. It showed Kellen positioning himself between her and her friends. It showed someone else blocking the camera briefly, then stepping aside. It showed the moment after the kiss when Leora nearly fell and Kellen caught her, not letting go. The footage ended just before the stairs. I forwarded everything to the officer immediately. By nightfall, warrants were issued. Phones were seized. Deleted files were recovered. The image of a harmless party collapsed under the weight of data. Morel stopped answering calls. People who had laughed hours earlier now scrambled to protect themselves. Kellen was detained again. This time, he asked for a lawyer. Leora's test results confirmed what the doctors had suspected earlier. The substances were not recreational. They were timed. They were specific. They explained the gaps, the confusion, the loss of control. Nothing about this was accidental. I sat alone in my car outside the hospital, hands on the steering wheel, watching the entrance doors slide open and closed. I thought about the kiss on the table, the way that image had been designed to redirect anger toward her. I thought about how easily people had accepted that version because it was simpler. Someone had used spectacle to hide something darker. That realization settled heavily. By the time I drove home, reporters were already circling the house where the party had taken place. Names leaked. Screenshots multiplied. People who had never met Leora spoke with certainty about her character. None of them knew what waited next. Because the evidence did not just point at one man. It pointed at everyone who watched, filmed, deleted, laughed, and stayed silent. And once the truth started moving, it did not slow down for anyone. By the third day, the story no longer belonged to the people who had tried to control it. What began as a single video sent to the wrong person had turned into a chain reaction that nobody could slow down. Police interviews expanded outward like ripples. Phones were unlocked under warrant. Cloud backups that people forgot existed filled in the gaps they believed were gone forever. Deleted footage returned in fragments first, then in full sequences that stitched the night back together with uncomfortable precision. The longer timeline changed everything. It showed Leora arriving already tired but alert, greeting people she recognized, setting her bag down near the kitchen. It showed her drink being topped off again and again, not by the same person, but by several, each time just a little more. It showed her friends being pulled into conversations away from her. It showed Kellen appearing where he should not have been, close before anyone realized he was there. What stood out most was not one moment, but the coordination. People moved around her like parts of a mechanism. One blocked her path while another spoke. One filmed while another distracted. When she tried to sit down, someone urged her to stand. When she leaned on the table, someone climbed up with her. When she lost balance, hands appeared quickly, guiding, repositioning, steering. By the time the kiss happened, the room was already primed. That was when the image everyone had seen froze in public memory, because it was loud, dramatic, and easy to judge. It made everything that followed harder to notice. The recovered footage showed the shift clearly. After the cheering faded, the energy changed. People began packing up. Music dropped. Leora sagged forward, her head heavy. Kellen stayed close. Others watched without intervening. Someone filmed the stairs. Someone else locked the bedroom door. Someone else stood guard. When police laid the videos side by side during interviews, excuses collapsed fast. Morel was brought in first. His confidence evaporated once investigators showed him the sequence he thought was gone. He admitted to deleting files, not to protect anyone in particular, but to protect the party itself, the image, the liability. He said he thought it would blow over. He said he did not think it was serious. He said everyone else was doing the same thing. Those statements did not help him. Kellen held out longer. He insisted on misinterpretation. He leaned on the table video, pointing to it as proof of agency, choice, mutual behavior. That argument failed the moment toxicology reports entered the record and timestamps aligned with ingestion windows. When confronted with footage of him returning to the house after claiming he had left, his posture changed. When shown the locked door on camera, his voice tightened. When investigators asked why he blocked others from entering the room, he stopped answering altogether. Charges followed quickly. News outlets picked up the story once arrest records became public. The framing shifted overnight. Headlines stopped focusing on the kiss and started focusing on the aftermath. Clips were embedded alongside medical statements and police confirmations. Comment sections turned volatile, then fractured as people realized the situation was not as simple as they had assumed. Some apologized publicly. Others doubled down. Leora did not see any of it at first. Doctors recommended distance from screens. Friends filtered information carefully. Still, fragments slipped through. A headline glimpsed in a hallway television. A notification preview left visible too long. Each glimpse took something from her, not loudly, but steadily. I stayed because there was nowhere else to be. We spoke less than we used to, not because there was nothing to say, but because words felt insufficient and dangerous at the same time. When she did speak, it was to ask questions nobody could answer. How much time was missing? Who had been there? Why nobody stopped it sooner? I had no clean responses. The pressure outside the hospital intensified. People who had been at the party started releasing statements through lawyers. Some claimed shock. Some claimed intoxication. Some claimed they assumed consent because nobody screamed. Each statement contradicted footage showing her inability to stand unassisted. One person tried to frame the situation as a misunderstanding fueled by alcohol and poor judgment. That argument collapsed when prosecutors released still images showing restraint, positioning, and isolation. By the end of the week, civil attorneys contacted us. They spoke carefully, outlining options without pushing. They mentioned liability, negligence, complicity. They explained that what happened was not limited to one action by one person. It was a series of decisions made by many. The weight of that knowledge was crushing. I returned to the house one last time with investigators present. The space felt smaller now, stripped of noise and illusion. Markers dotted the floor. Measurements were taken. The bedroom door was removed for evidence processing. What had once been just a room now felt like a sealed chapter. Neighbors watched from their porches, curiosity thinly veiled as concern. Cameras followed us when we left. The engagement ended quietly, not with confrontation or blame, but with exhaustion and understanding that something fundamental had shifted. Leora needed space to heal without reminders. I needed distance from the night that replayed every time I closed my eyes. Neither of us said it out loud at first, but the truth settled between us like gravity. When she left the hospital, she did not come home with me. Kellen was denied bail. Morel lost his job before charges were finalized. Others involved faced disciplinary action at work once their names surfaced. Invitations stopped. Messages went unanswered. Social circles collapsed inward as people realized proximity alone could now be dangerous. Court dates were scheduled. Evidence lists grew longer. The story that had once been a single video now spanned thousands of files. I testified during a preliminary hearing, not emotionally, not dramatically, but clearly. I described the timeline. I described what I saw. I described what was sent to me and when. The room was silent as the footage played again, this time stripped of sound, stripped of spectacle, shown frame by frame. No cheering, no music, just movement. That presentation changed the tone permanently. By the time the hearing ended, it was clear this would not be resolved quietly. This would not fade with attention spans. This would leave marks. Outside the courthouse, microphones waited. I did not speak. I did not need to. The evidence spoke loudly enough. And as the legal process moved forward, one thing became undeniable. What destroyed the night was not exposure. It was accountability. And once it arrived, there was no way back to how things were before. By the time the case reached its final stage, the noise had changed. At first, everything had been loud. Sirens, headlines, notifications, opinions layered on top of each other until it was impossible to separate truth from reaction. Then, gradually, the volume dropped. What remained was slower, heavier, and harder to escape. Courtrooms are quiet places when consequences arrive. Kellen sat at the defense table smaller than he had ever looked at the party. The confidence that once carried him through lies had burned off under weeks of evidence, transcripts, and expert testimony. The timeline was no longer a theory. It was mapped minute by minute, supported by footage, medical data, and digital records that left no room for interpretation. The court did not argue about whether something wrong had happened. The only question left was how much responsibility belonged to each person who played a role. Kellen was convicted on multiple charges. The sentence was not theatrical, not exaggerated, but substantial enough to matter. Prison time, registration, restrictions that would follow him long after release. When the decision was read, there was no outburst, no denial, no final speech. He stared forward, jaw tight, as if still hoping silence might undo damage already documented in permanent records. Morrell stood trial separately. His case focused on obstruction, evidence destruction, and reckless endangerment. His defense leaned on ignorance, on claims of panic and poor judgment. That argument failed once investigators presented deleted files recovered from backups he claimed not to know existed. Messages between him and others showed coordination, not confusion. He avoided prison, but not consequences. Heavy fines, probation, civil liability that would follow him for years. The house was sold to cover settlements. His social presence vanished almost overnight. People who once crowded his events crossed the street to avoid him. The others faded quietly. Some lost jobs. Some transferred cities. Some changed names online. None of them issued apologies that mattered. Silence became the strategy once denial failed. Leora moved 3 weeks after leaving the hospital. Not dramatically, not in secret, just far enough away to breathe without being recognized. Therapy became routine. Some days were manageable. Others were not. Recovery did not follow a straight line, and she stopped pretending that it would. We spoke occasionally, carefully. There was no bitterness between us. Only an understanding that proximity to the past could slow healing. The engagement ended without ceremony, without announcements. Rings returned. Photos archived. Plans dissolved quietly, like something fragile exposed to air too long. People asked me how I felt about the kiss. That question revealed more about them than it ever could about me. I stopped answering. Instead, I focused on the aftermath that most people never see. The paperwork, the testimony, the waiting, the slow realization that justice does not arrive as relief, but as weight. Each decision carried permanence. Each signature closed a door that could never reopen. When the civil cases concluded, funds were allocated to medical care and long-term support. No amount felt like compensation, but resources mattered. Accountability mattered more. The video that started everything disappeared from public platforms eventually, taken down after court orders and policy enforcement. Copies still existed somewhere, undoubtedly, but they lost relevance once the full story replaced the fragment that had misled so many. I changed routines, new routes, new social circles, fewer assumptions about safety in familiar spaces. Trust became something earned slowly, deliberately, without shortcuts. I began working with an organization focused on party safety and digital accountability, not publicly at first, then more openly once I understood how common these situations were. Technology that had once been used to exploit was repurposed to document, protect, and intervene. Education replaced speculation. Protocols replaced excuses. It was not activism driven by anger. It was structure built from experience. Occasionally, someone from that night would reach out. Some apologized awkwardly. Some asked for forgiveness without understanding what they were asking for. I did not respond. Not because I wanted revenge, but because the chapter was closed, and reopening it would serve no purpose. Closure did not feel like peace. It felt like distance. Months later, I attended the final review hearing alone. The judge summarized the case plainly, without commentary, without emotion. When it ended, the room emptied quickly. There were no cameras left. No reporters. Just staff packing files into boxes. Outside, the air felt different. Life did not reset. It adjusted. Leora sent a message weeks later, brief and calm, saying she was doing better, that she had started volunteering, that she had learned to sleep again. I replied once, wishing her stability, nothing more. That exchange felt complete. Some stories end with triumph. This one ended with permanence. Careers ended. Relationships ended. Illusions ended. What remained was accountability recorded in court documents, scars carried privately, and systems changed quietly so fewer people would ever stand in the same hallway waiting for answers that arrived too late. What happened that night could not be undone, but what followed ensured it would not be forgotten, minimized, or dismissed again. That was the consequence. Not revenge, not redemption, just reality, documented, enforced, and carried forward by everyone who survived it.